Welcome to my channel Limelight Leaks. Please share and subscribe, and hit the bell icon for latest updates. Tom Smith became famous really fast on Fast and Loud with his funny jokes and amazing car skills. Then he suddenly left the show. But what really happened behind the scenes is way more complicated than anyone thought. Let's find out the real reason he had to leave the show. Tom Smith leaving Fast and Loud was a big surprise in the car building world. It all started with a group of car mechanics who used to work for Richard Rawlings. He was the tough boss who owned Gas Monkey Garage. What seemed like a good working friendship quickly fell apart after one tiny thing happened that became a huge problem. For Tom Smith, leaving Gas Monkey wasn't easy at all. The thing that started everything seemed harmless at first, but it became something that couldn't be fixed. One day, someone visited Gas Monkey and asked to take a photo with Richard Rawlings's fancy Rolls-Royce car. Smith and his friend Jordan Butler, who also worked there, thought it was okay to let the person take the picture. To them, it was just a simple photo. But the garage manager got really angry about it and yelled at them. He didn't just ignore it. Instead, he screamed across the garage and got mad at both mechanics in front of everyone who was watching. That moment started the big fight. Smith never liked to stay quiet when someone yelled at him. So he yelled angry words right back at the manager and used bad words too. What started as just taking a picture quickly turned into a big argument between them. Rawlings didn't wait around when he heard what happened. Smith and Butler got fired from their jobs almost right away. Rawlings later said he thought both men were hard to work with and that getting rid of them was the best thing for his garage. But for Smith and Butler, getting fired actually opened up a brand new path for their lives. Butler felt really hurt because it was the first time he had ever been fired from a job. Smith, however, looked at the situation in a different way. He didn't see getting fired as failing, but as getting pushed towards something better. He even thought about how many successful people had been fired before they found their way to success. He chose not to feel ashamed, but instead used that moment as energy to build something even greater than before. Not long after they left, Smith and Butler teamed up with two other mechanics from Texas. Scott McMillan was another guy who used to work at Gas Monkey, and he brought his own experience with him. Thomas Weeks added a fresh sense of style and creativity to the group. Together, these four men started their own car shop. They decided to call it Fired Up Garage, and soon the Discovery Channel gave them money to make a new TV show. By October 2014, Misfit Garage was on television. It was both a car fixing show and a story about making a comeback after failure. The show had the same kind of setup that fans of car shows had grown to love watching. In each episode, the crew looked for cars that seemed forgotten by everyone. Some were getting rusty in empty fields. Others were kept in storage spaces or left outside to rot away. Sometimes the crew bought cars from auctions, and other times customers brought in their own cars, hoping to see them look new again. The team would then start working by taking apart the cars and building them back up from scratch. They used both old-fashioned methods and creative new tricks to bring each car back to life. But the work was never easy or smooth. Misfit Garage became famous as much for its fighting as for its cars. Arguments broke out over money, over car parts, over designs, and over timing deadlines. Different personalities clashed when things got heated in the shop. Deadlines brought lots of pressure. Broken engines slowed down their progress. And fights happened both on the work floor and between the crew members. For people watching at home, that drama gave the show an exciting edge. It kept people glued to their TVs, not just to watch cars shine again, but also to see how the team managed to stay together through all their constant struggles and fights. The rivalry with Gas Monkey Garage only made the show more interesting to watch. Richard Rawlings made sure he didn't disappear from the story completely. He showed up from time to time, often stirring up even more conflict between the shops. The two garages became locked in a competition that nobody talked about directly. Each side wanted to prove they could build better cars, make better deals, and grab more attention from fans. The tension became its own story, running alongside the car builds and giving fans more reasons to follow every single episode. Behind the cameras, the work was even harder than what people saw on TV. Not everything made it onto the screen for viewers to see. Some repairs that looked quick on TV had actually taken endless hours to complete. The team often found themselves forced to come up with solutions on the spot, digging deep into toolboxes and creating custom parts when original pieces were impossible to find anywhere. Shortcuts rarely worked out well, so the men had to think quickly and push themselves through one problem after another until they found solutions. For all its drama and fighting, Misfit Garage stood for something bigger than just car shows. It told the story of starting over again after getting knocked down. It showed how people who had been pushed out could gather themselves together, build up new energy, and make their own place in the world. Fired Up Garage became more than just a shop where they fixed cars. It became proof that even when things looked completely broken, they could be put back together with skill, hard work, and belief in yourself. The journey was far from smooth and easy. Mistakes were made, people got angry at each other, and engines failed at the worst possible times. Yet, the crew kept pushing forward no matter what happened. Each finished car carried the story of struggle hidden beneath its shiny, polished surface. Viewers only saw the final product and the drama that happened around it, but underneath all the sparks and grease were countless hours of sweat and never giving up. Misfit Garage never tried to hide how rough and difficult their road was. Instead, it embraced the struggle and made it part of the story. The show became about a group of men who refused to stay down after being fired from their jobs. It turned anger and disappointment into drive and creativity. It turned a small spark of conflict into an entire TV series that drew fans from around the whole world. Even though some things never felt right and some struggles never fully went away, Misfit Garage grew into something strong and successful. The shop stood on its own, powered by the skills of its crew and their desire to prove themselves to everyone. From a single photo that started a chain of events, a new world of cars and conflict was born, showing how people can take what breaks them and build something even greater from the pieces. Tom Smith stood out on the show not only for the way he handled engines and bodywork, but also for the humor he brought into every scene. He had a quick mind that could turn a tense moment into something lighter and funnier, and his one-liners became part of what made the show charming and fun to watch. Many fans at the time remembered his presence as something that balanced out the often heated and competitive garage atmosphere that surrounded everyone. Yet, as years went by, his role in that chapter of television faded in people's memory, leaving only small reminders for those who had followed the show closely from the beginning. The roots of what became Fired Up Garage connected directly to his own childhood dreams and memories. Long before television found him and made him famous, he had imagined a space where he could work on cars and call it FNU Garage. The initials stood for Fired Up, and they stayed with him through all the years as he grew older. What had once been only a boyhood dream found its way into reality when the name was finally used on screen for everyone to see. That small detail gave the garage more meaning for him because it tied back to a vision he had carried since he was young. Beyond the garage and the show, Tom built another path that set him apart from most mechanics who just worked on cars. He had a deep interest in comedy, something that kept pulling him toward the stage to perform for people. Even while the cameras rolled for Misfit Garage, he stepped away in his free time to perform at improv clubs, bringing his humor to live audiences who came to laugh. He balanced both lives, working with grease and tools during the day, and then switching gears at night to bring laughter to crowds of people. Over time, comedy became more than just a side activity for fun. It began to take up more space in his daily life, showing that his talent stretched far beyond just fixing cars. When the COVID-19 pandemic brought much of the world to a halt, Tom found a way to keep moving forward with his career. While many shows and events were shut down because of the virus, he managed to perform live comedy sessions, keeping his audiences entertained even during those really difficult times for everyone. He adapted by staying on stage whenever possible, proving that his drive to make people laugh could not be held back by anything. His performances during those years kept his name alive among fans who had first discovered him through cars, but stayed because they loved his humor and personality. Still, Tom never turned his back completely on the automotive world that made him famous. He continued to work on cars, taking on personal projects, as well as jobs for clients who trusted his skills and experience. He shared updates with his followers on social media, showing photos and notes about the vehicles he was working on and shaping. These posts reminded people that he remained deeply connected to the garage life that had first introduced him to them. Each update showed the same passion for engines and restoration that had once made him a familiar face on television screens. What made him even more admired by fans was the way he reached beyond his professional work to give time and energy to animals in need of help. He joined efforts to rescue and transport dogs, making sure they found safety and proper care from loving families. This side of his life showed a softer, compassionate edge that balanced out his comic and mechanical sides perfectly. Fans who followed his journey found it inspiring to see him step in to help creatures that had no voice of their own to ask for help. Along the way, he also began to drop hints about the possibility of starting a show of his own in the future. Through social media, he suggested that an auto modification program could be in the works and coming soon. This stirred excitement among his supporters, many of whom had hoped to see him take the spotlight again and return to television. His posts created the feeling that another chapter might still be waiting for him, one where both his humor and his skill with cars could come together once more for everyone to enjoy. Tom stayed active online, keeping his followers updated about his projects, his comedy shows, and his work with animals that needed rescue. His social media pages became a window into his life, letting people see how he continued to build on the same passion and energy that had once made him a favorite on Misfit Garage. From cars to comedy to dog rescue, his days were filled with activity and movement, and he managed to blend all of it into a life that kept drawing attention from fans. What made his story stand out was the way he never let himself be pinned down by just one role or job. He moved between being a mechanic, performer, and volunteer, carrying the same enthusiasm into each part of his life with equal energy. The boy who once dreamed of having his own garage grew into a man who found ways to live out several dreams at once, never staying still for very long. Tom Smith kept shaping a path that felt entirely his own, one that carried on even after the lights of television moved away to other shows. Interestingly, there still seemed to be something fishy going on behind the scenes of Fired Up Garage that fans didn't know about. When Fired Up Garage appeared on television for the first time, it had the look of a brand new shop that had boldly broken away from the shadow of Gas Monkey Garage. Viewers were led to believe that it was an independent garage with its own rules, its own crew, and its own future ahead of it. Yet beneath all the smoke and noise of the show, the real story was very different from what people saw. Richard Rawlings never truly stepped aside or walked away from the business. He had built Gas Monkey Garage into a household name that everyone knew. And even when Fired Up tried to stand on its own, his control never loosened or went away. From the very start of the very first season, his presence could be felt in ways that went far beyond just appearing on screen sometimes. Richard stood in the background with layers of control that shaped almost everything about the show in ways viewers couldn't see. His role as executive producer gave him a direct line into the heart of the series and how it was made. That position meant he could decide the direction, guide the flow, and cut down anything that didn't fit into his vision for the show. Cars that rolled through the doors of Fired Up Garage were not chosen at random by the crew. Their stories were picked specifically to create drama, excitement, or sometimes failure for the cameras. Repairs were carried out with cameras in mind, with every step shaped to keep viewers hooked and watching. Richard decided how the work was displayed on screen, what got left out of episodes, and what kind of story the finished project would tell to audiences. Money gave him even more power over the entire operation than people realized. As the one who controlled the budget, he held the strings that decided how far each car build could go. He could set aside enough cash to make a car shine beautifully, or he could cut the spending so that the crew had to take shortcuts and struggle through their work. Every single dollar passed through his hands before it could be spent. And with that control, he was able to push the story in whatever direction he wanted it to go. When he cut back on funds, the mechanics had to fight harder to get things done, and that created more drama for the cameras to capture. Beyond that, he also controlled how the final product reached viewers, shaping how the show got to the audience and what kind of image Fired Up Garage was supposed to have. Richard also owned the actual physical space where the garage operated every day. He wasn't just the face in the credits at the end of episodes. He was the landlord who owned the building. This gave him yet another angle of control that most people didn't realize. The Fired Up crew worked under a roof that technically belonged to him, and that meant he could step in whenever he felt like it. Often he would walk through the doors without any warning or announcement. Sometimes he would stir up arguments between the crew members. Sometimes he would make fun of the mechanics, push them off balance, and add fuel to whatever chaos was already happening in the shop. His sudden arrivals always brought tension and drama with them. Even though it seemed like he was just playing around for the cameras, his role as the landlord showed that his authority and power were very real. On the show, Richard often played the part of a troublemaker who liked to cause problems. He came across as someone who enjoyed throwing roadblocks into the team's path and making their work harder. Yet behind the scenes, he had a clear reason to want the garage to succeed and do well. The business needed to stay alive so that he could keep making money from it, both as the landlord and as the producer. Still, his behavior often painted a different picture for viewers. Instead of helping the shop move forward, his actions appeared to hold the crew back, making it harder for them to succeed while at the same time keeping the viewers entertained and watching. His name continued to appear in the credits of every episode, always close to Eddie Roeder's, the man seen as the key figure for the show's success. Also, his label as creative talent was never fully explained to viewers, but it gave a sense that he had influence over the feel of the series itself. He could shape the tone, the look, and even the rhythm of each episode however he wanted. With each role he played, executive producer, landlord, creative talent, and on-screen guest, he pulled in more control strings until the entire project seemed tied to him, no matter how much it tried to appear free. There was also the matter of his paycheck that most people didn't know about. Reports began to spread that Richard Rawlings earned close to $22,000 for every single time he appeared on screen during an episode. That amount of money meant he had more than one reason to keep walking into the garage and stirring things up with the crew. His drama created higher ratings for the network, and ratings created profit not just for the TV channel, but also directly for his own bank account. Fired Up Garage was sold to viewers as the enemy and rival of Gas Monkey Garage. But Richard's deep ties to both shops showed that the separation was little more than a staged idea created for television. As episodes continued to air, people began to catch on to what was really happening. Viewers noticed that his name popped up far too often in the credits for him to be an outsider. Online discussions started pointing out how staged the drama looked and how forced some of the conflicts felt to audiences. The so-called feud that was meant to draw a clear line between the two garages started to look more like a story written purely for entertainment purposes. What was shown on television as a real rivalry could have been little more than a planned storyline designed to keep people watching. Richard's control over the budget, his ownership of the garage space, his management of the show's image, and his profit from appearances all tied together to form a larger picture of what was really happening. Fired Up Garage may have been dressed up as a breakaway shop that stood on its own, but in reality, it was still under his control from behind the scenes. The two garages that were meant to stand apart actually moved under the same plan, directed by someone who knew exactly how to turn drama into profit and money. Fired Up Garage appeared on television as a place full of energy and success that was thriving in the car business. But away from the cameras, the real picture was very different from what fans saw. On the screen, it seemed like a profitable shop that made good money by restoring old cars and turned them into valuable machines that people wanted to buy. In reality, the business side of it never worked as smoothly as fans imagined it would. Running such a shop cost far more money than most people realized or understood. Wages for skilled mechanics had to be paid on time every week. Electricity bills never stopped coming in the mail, And buying rare parts for classic vehicles drained the budget very quickly. Even repainting cars and giving them a polished look so they would shine on camera added to the heavy costs they had to deal with. To put it in perspective, for the garage to bring in $100,000 in a single month, they would have had to complete close to 50 full car builds. That kind of number was impossible with the limited staff, tools, and time they had available to work with. Attempting something like that would only have worn out the workers and pushed them past their limits, without producing the right results they needed. The truth was simple and hard to accept. Working in the car restoration industry demanded huge amounts of money before it brought anything back in return. Restoring vehicles meant breaking them down completely, replacing parts, upgrading features, giving them new paint jobs, and testing them until they worked like new cars again. Each step came with costs that piled up faster than profits could keep up with the expenses. Fans often thought the shop stayed alive financially by selling the finished cars at high prices to wealthy buyers. But that was not how things actually worked in the real world. The real lifeline of Fired Up Garage came from the television show Misfit Garage and the money it brought in. The show gave the team more financial security than any car build or sale ever could provide. With an audience of nearly 1.5 million viewers per episode, the exposure was enormous and valuable. People tuned in not just to see the cars being built, but also to watch the personalities and drama that happened in the shop between the crew members. That attention kept the garage relevant and famous, even when the actual car sales brought in very little money to keep them going. On average, the garage earned only around $2,000 from each vehicle they sold to customers. After paying for all the expenses and the time invested in each build, such a small profit did little to keep the shop running, especially since it had to be split among several business partners. What truly supported the mechanics and kept them working was the income from the TV show itself. Reports revealed that each main crew member earned between $17,000 and $25,000 for every episode they appeared in. Compared to the tiny profits from flipping cars, this TV pay was the real reason the team could keep going and stay in business. Even with the show's financial backing, many car builds still failed to bring meaningful returns or profits. A clear example happened during season 4, when the crew took on a 1961 Ford Econoline pickup truck as their project. They planned to restore it with a budget of $25,000, which had to cover materials, labor, and every small detail of the entire build. Yet, when they finally sold the finished truck, the reality of the numbers once again showed how little money there was in the car business. The buyer was actor Danny Trejo, well known from the Machete movies that many people had seen. Although he really liked the truck and thought it looked great, he only paid $27,000 for the completed vehicle. After taking away the $25,000 they spent to restore it, the team was left with just $2,000 in profit from all their hard work. That small amount had to be divided among all the business partners, leaving very little money for each of them after weeks of hard work in the garage. The effort poured into the build, the hours spent working in the shop, and the stress of meeting deadlines did not match the thin financial return they received. However, there was another angle to that sale that might have been more valuable than money. Thomas Weeks believed the deal could help the garage in ways that cash could not measure or replace. Trejo promised to park the flashy truck in front of one of his taco restaurants in Los Angeles, where lots of people would see it. His businesses drew plenty of customers every day, and the idea was that people passing by would see the unusual vehicle, ask questions about it, and possibly discover the TV show. That kind of free advertising exposure could bring in new fans and spread the garage's name far beyond its usual audience of car enthusiasts. The episode did not reveal if Trejo ever actually parked the truck at his restaurant as promised, but the actor seemed happy with his purchase and the deal they made. For him, getting a custom restored truck for $27,000 was a good deal that he felt good about. For Fired Up Garage, the benefit may have been less about immediate profit and more about getting visibility and recognition. Even if they walked away with little money in their pockets, the chance to gain wider attention from new audiences could still pay off in the long run for their business. The harsh truth was always the same, no matter what project they worked on. Television kept the garage alive and running. Without the regular paychecks from the show, the team would not have been able to cover their basic expenses and bills. Each car build was a gamble that required money up front, long hours of hard labor, and constant pressure to deliver results on time. The outcome rarely matched the effort they put in, but as long as cameras were rolling, there was a reason to push through the struggles. Over time, though, things began to change in ways that affected everyone involved. The demands of filming episodes, the lack of real profits from car sales, and the constant grind of work wore down the people involved in the show. One by one, members of the cast began to step away from the garage and find other opportunities. Some left in search of better job opportunities that paid more money, while others grew tired of the struggle between keeping up appearances on screen and facing the harsh financial reality behind the scenes. The dream of building cars for a living had turned into something very different from what many of them had expected when they started. Fired Up Garage remained a fascinating story for fans who loved watching the show every week. But behind its bold image on television, it was a place where the numbers rarely added up to make real money. It showed how tough and challenging the car restoration business could be in the real world, and how in the end, fame and entertainment often mattered more than the actual cars themselves. The cycle of effort, pressure, and thin rewards defined the garage's journey until the people who once carried it forward chose to walk away and find something better.